Also, freshman Rep. Len Green is here. He's a political legacy, but bringing a fresh set of eyes to Connecticut's issues. And we're checking in with our D.C. delegation. Congressman Joe Courtney and Senator Richard Blumenthal tell us what they're focused on this week. Hi, you're watching The Real Story. I'm Lori Perez. It seems the place to be nowadays is at one of Governor Malloy's town hall meetings. In towns across the state, night after night, hundreds are converging to confront the governor. With a mixture of applause and appeals, they are letting him know what they think. The question is whether he's hearing them. At least Governor Malloy can joke about the beating he's been taking.
Great to be back in Meriden, and I, for one, am happy that this is Lincoln Theater, not Ford's Theater.
He well knows the level of frustration he faces. In fact, by now, Town Hall meeting number 8, you'd think Malloy has just about heard every complaint and critique, rant and rave there is about his proposed budget.
How much more can these little shops take?
I'm just hoping he sees how passionate us students are about the schools.
State employees are taxpayers, so we're going to get hit double.
Maybe he has heard it all, or maybe he hasn't, but that isn't stopping the mostly discontented masses, many saying they'll keep talking until they're sure he's listening. Tonight, on a few occasions, he assured the crowd he is.
I am committed to your goal. I am committed to driving the cost down as low as possible. I am committed to accessing those federal dollars. I'm even committed to the state playing a role and participating, but I can't write a blank check.
Nor, some here might say, can they, saying before they share the sacrifice, they're going to share their ideas. Ken Krajewski, infamous for challenging UConn basketball coach Jim Calhoun on his salary, came with a list of 10 billionaires, suggesting Malloy consider a net worth tax.
Because if we just tax Stephen Cohen, a 55-year-old Greenwich hedge fund billionaire who's worth $8 billion, half of his net worth covers our state budget, and we don't have to worry about taxing somebody who makes $50,000 an extra $500 a year.
Now, that's an idea not likely to be seriously considered. House Speaker Chris Donovan said tonight, though, others certainly might be.
It's not like we're trying to pull something over on you. Here it is. What do you think we ought to do to balance our budget? Here's the goal. Balance our budget.
Now, therefore, 3 of the 8 town hall meetings so far has been Mark Pazniokis. He's the Capitol Bureau Chief for the Connecticut Mirror, ctmirror.org on the Internet. Mark, thanks for being here. Tell me what you would, your overall impression of how the meetings are going, you think?
Well, I mean, there's been an evolution. The first one in Bridgeport had a kind of ragged quality to it. They didn't have any formal sign-ups. People, I think, had the feeling they could wander in and speak to the governor. And what we've seen is the productions have become productions. They've become a little sharper. At the first one, Governor Malloy spoke for 20 minutes of the hour. Now he's under 8 minutes and a very crisp presentation at the beginning. But there's been other changes. You know, it's become more like formal public hearings at the Capitol, and the politically savvy out there know to get there early and sign up and try to dominate the message.
Yeah, I know that people have been showing up. You know, traditionally these meetings start at 7, and some people have been getting there at like 5:30, which is... Are you surprised at the number of people that are showing up?
I've been a little surprised at how they've grown. I mean, these have become events, and the question is, how do you interpret that? Is this show growing anger? Does it show growing curiosity about this really unprecedented road show by a new governor to go out there and sell a big tax increase and some unpopular spending cuts? Now, Malloy's people insist they believe it's a sign of public engagement with their governor, and they view it as a positive sign.
Well, it's interesting because, as you know, when he walks in the room, I mean, he does get applause. He gets, you know, people applause and whistle. I don't know if that's, you know, Roy Oki or Grosso, but I mean, they do. I mean, they are fairly polite when he gets in. With
the exception of Meriden, I think that's been the case. Mm-hmm. He gets a very good round of applause at the beginning. And at the end, again, with the exception of Meriden, which had a really kind of funky edge to it, he gets applause. It's almost, I think at times, it's a maybe grudging respect that, you know, he's out there taking questions, and they're seldom pleasant questions, and he's doing it, sometimes 2-3 nights a week.
Yeah, you said that you've mentioned twice that there's been this evolution, and we both thought that the Meriden event was perhaps the most vitriolic of them. Do you think that as it goes on, I mean, people are, they've been reading the newspaper, reading online, seeing the news, and so now they kind of have a base on which to go and really get detailed and really get aggressive with him? Or
I think there's some organization that's going on around these, and we saw that in Meriden. I wonder if the governor is starting to regret floating this idea that's not fully realized yet about taking the state vocational technical school system and giving it over to some type of local control, whether it's regional or specific municipalities, because that's generating a lot of heat. And we saw that in Meriden. These kids were very well organized. They got there early. They lined up. But it got to the point they so dominated the meeting that these high school kids who were really showing they understood civic engagement, they were being booed because people wanted to hear other kinds of questions.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I've been surprised at how much we've heard about the technical school plan. Is there anything else that you're surprised that people are bringing up? A lot, of course, the unions always seem to, I use the word plant, the question about the Bank of America, they say not paying income tax, and that consistently is one of the first questions always at these meetings.
Well, whether it's a result of organization or whether it's more organic, I think there's genuinely concerns and complaints about, is this tax plan the most equitable? And I think there's some give on that. I think that's one of the cases that at the end of this, Malloy may be a little bit more open, I think, to making adjustments. And I emphasize little. He does not really want to go above a top income tax rate of 6.7%. But I wouldn't be surprised if he shows a willingness to negotiate about the people at $500,000 or, whether their rate goes up a little bit more.
So you think it's working?
It's of course, with a guy like Malloy, it's really hard to judge because he's keeping it kind of close to the vest. But he's signaled more and more that he's open to some changes as long as it meets some basic principles of keeping the state competitive, of not having any gimmicks, no borrowing, no deferrals of pension contributions, things like that. But he's, he made it a point at the end of the town hall in Meriden to say, as the Speaker of the House who had introduced him, the Speaker said, the legislature gets to shape it. And he really hadn't been going out of his way to acknowledge that. In fact, he had been saying, you start messing with it, it becomes your budget.
Well, and that's the other question that I think some people have is this just a show? Because in the end, I mean, it really is going to be up to the lawmakers.
Well, yes and no. I mean, the sitting governor has tremendous power, and he, as we've seen, he's defining the debate. The legislature will react to him, and the legislature is still trying to really figure this guy out.
Yeah.
They're trying to determine what will he move on, what is he absolutely dug in on. The Speaker of the House, Chris Donovan, he's seen as, among the stronger advocates for more progressive income tax. He's played his cards really close to the vest. I mean, he wants to see it more progressive, but he is waiting and watching to see how it plays out.
The other thing that I think has been notable at these meetings is whenever someone gets up and is critical of state workers and kind of says, well, I wish I had a state job, and, state workers this and that, but then half the crowd is state workers,
And some are there looking for cuts in the managerial ranks. Some are there to say, hey, you want me to give up salary, but you also want me to pay more taxes. And I think, part of that is state employees are genuinely feeling under the gun, and some of it is they're a little bit, I think, organized at these things.
Do you think that do you think there's going to be a fight over this budget once we get to it? Some people say, no, it's going to go through and they'll just blame it on the governor, and other people say, no, it's going to be brutal.
There's a $1 billion question out there. How are the labor negotiations going to end up with the state employees? If they go smoothly and they come up with significant concessions, I think you're going to see this resolved relatively peacefully. There'll be some adjustments here and there, but if those talks fail, I think all bets are off. It's going to be very ugly because he's going to need to do deep cuts in programs. He's already put a lot of programs off the table, local aid for education. That's almost $2 billion that he's saying won't be touched. There's big chunks of the budget you really can't monkey with. So if he has to cut another billion in spending, that becomes an incredible task.
What's your impression so far in talking with the labor groups?
I've actually just this week and last I've done some interviews, and they are surprisingly, so far, saying it really has not got ugly yet. But the clock is ticking. They want to resolve this within the normal time frame of a budget, where the Appropriations Committee will report it out at the end of April, and they want to be ready to go in May. You've heard Malloy starting a week ago, instead of saying, I have no idea when we'll have a budget, whether it will take all summer. Now he's been saying May, and the legislative leaders are saying the same thing. They're trying to get their members oriented to the idea that, folks, we're going to do it in regular time, not in overtime, and have a long summer.
Right. Well, it'll be something to watch, I'm sure.
It will.
Thank you to Mark Paznielkis from the Connecticut Mirror, ctmirror.org. Tomorrow, Monday night, the town hall meeting stops in Hartford. I'm sure that's going to be interesting. Coming up, Representative Len Green is here to talk about whether Republican lawmakers are taking on the governor as well.